And today's webinar will go over the basics of setting up a property for tenant space recognition in Portfolio Manager, and it will also give an overview of the tenant space program. Also, as a heads up, we will be going through the slide deck, and then at the very end, I will be sharing my screen to show you putting some of the pieces together. But a lot of this will be slide deck based for today. All right, learning objectives for today are number 1, learning eligibility requirements for tenant space recognition. 2, understanding how to apply for ENERGY STAR Tenant Space recognition. 3, learning how to track the status of applications. So the links on this slide, also every slide that you're going to see, as we said, the slides are going to be emailed out to everybody at the end by a couple days from now. So you will be getting all those hyperlinks, so you'll be able to access them. And these links will provide you with more information on the tenant space program, including guides for setting up your property for tenant recognition in Portfolio Manager. All right. So what is ENERGY STAR Tenant Space? So the ENERGY STAR Tenant Space is an EPA recognition for sustainability efforts in your leased office space. So we appreciate the effort that your organization puts into keeping your leased space energy efficient, and we want to provide you with recognition. Your tenant space plays a critical role in sustainability efforts, and we hope that you are in turn energized by the lower utility bills that come from emitting fewer greenhouse gas emissions into our atmosphere. So what is a tenant space? So a tenant space is made up of all the space that a tenant occupies in a building. This tenant space can be made up of space that is contiguous, or it can be made up of space that is not contiguous, such as a tenant space that spans multiple floors of an office building. On this slide, we have 3 examples of properties that are considered tenant spaces. The first property in yellow occupies 3 separate suites, with 2 suites that are touching, and then the third is down the hall, so it's not touching. Even though not all of these spaces are touching, all 3 suites shown in yellow belong to one tenant. So therefore, all 3 suites are included under one tenant space label. For another example, Blue Ocean Media, which is in the dark teal, occupies 2 suites that do not touch, as seen with the red space between them. So even so, as they are both a part of one tenant, these 2 spaces are included in their entirety in an ENERGY STAR Tenant Space application. And finally, Green Law Partners has 2 suites, each on a separate floor of the building. Because these 2 suites are a part of the same tenant organization, these 2 suites are included in the ENERGY STAR Tenant Space application, regardless of the fact that the 2 suites are on separate floors. So basically for this slide, if it's owned by one tenant organization, regardless of if the spaces are touching or on the same floor or not, you are going to include all of those spaces in one tenant space application. You're not going to submit multiple applications for different floors. On this slide, we will cover eligibility criteria for tenant space recognition. To access the tenant tool, your tenant space must, 1, be either a general administrative office, financial office, or a non-diagnostic medical office. Your space may include a data center. 2, your space must also represent all of your usable office square footage in the building. Your usable square footage is defined as all of the areas within the demising walls reserved for your exclusive usage. And number three, it must be located within the US or the United States. So the tenant space recognition program is currently only available in the United States. Also, for more information, I'm just going to send a link in the chat that you can access. All right, so that article is about what is tenant space recognition and what are the eligibility requirements. So what is the criteria for recognition? So on this slide, you see a few different bullet points for what you must do in order to earn ENERGY STAR Tenant Space recognition. So the first one, estimating energy use. You must understand your energy use because that helps identify actions that you can take to make the biggest impact. You will not have to meet any energy use target to qualify for recognition. You must also meter your energy use because you cannot manage what you don't measure. And you have to use lighting efficiently because lighting is a major energy user and it's also one of the most cost-effective upgrades that you can make. You will need to meet a lighting energy use target to qualify for recognition. And then for using efficient equipment, upgrading equipment reduces the large energy draw from plug loads. You must have a procurement policy in place that specifies purchase of ENERGY STAR certified projects whenever applicable, or with using substantially similar language, but please do specify ENERGY STAR certified products and also make sure to write in the date of the procurement policy. The procurement policy must be for the tenant organization, and it also must be signed by the tenant organization. And then sharing meter data with the landlord as requested. So your data may enable whole building benchmarking, which then supports strategic investment in energy performance and is often needed for compliance with local laws and mandates. So basically for that last one, if you are asked by your landlord to help them figure out how much energy you're using, please do share it with them. That is an important part of our application process and also very important for whole building energy efficiency efforts. On this slide, we cover the tenant space recognition process. So first, it's going to be adding your tenant space to Portfolio Manager, then accessing the tenant tool. 3 is generating an application for tenant space recognition. 4 is having a licensed professional or LP conduct a site visit and verifying the information in your application. 5 is completing the online application and submitting the application to EPA electronically. And then 6 is responding to questions from EPA as necessary. And 7 is receiving notification of the application's final status. All right, setting up your tenant space. Let's get into it. So this is the part that we are going to go through on slides first, and then we are going to go through the screen at the end. So once you've added your tenant space to Portfolio Manager, the tenant space will appear on the Summary tab. So that's the default landing location after logging into your account in the bottom left-hand corner of the window as seen on this slide. If you do need to stop in the middle of the application process, you may do so. When you return to your buildings page, simply click on the Go to Tenant Tool button again, and you will be brought to the Tenant Space Recognition homepage, where you'll see Finish your application for tenant space recognition at the top of the page. So this is how you begin or resume an application for your property. The first time that you visit the tenant tool, you'll be directed to the initial landing page. After initial setup, this will bring you directly to the tenant space homepage. As a first step of the tenant space application process and prior to entering information specific to your tenant space, you will need to answer a few questions related to the whole building. This information helps calculate many of the metrics that are needed for your tenant space as part of the application process. You may need to reach out to your landlord or property manager for the information that you will need, which will include the building name, gross floor area, and total number of conditioned floors, and also the primary heating fuel type. When entering square footage information, you'll refer to the information in the Tenant Tool GFA's tip to understand different types of gross floor area calculations. Once building information is entered, you will be directed to the Tenant Tool homepage, where you will enter information about each floor or suite that you occupy in the building. This homepage also allows you to track your overall tenant space metrics, including estimated source and site energy and lighting EUI metrics, as well as to edit the floors or suites that have been previously entered. This page is also where you will be able to see whether your tenant space is eligible for recognition, and if so, begin the application process once all the floor suite information has been entered. Here you're going to click on Add a Tenant Floor or Suite to begin entering information about your floor or suite that you occupy in the building. For each floor or suite included in your tenant space, you'll need to provide the name of the floor or suite, its usable floor area, whether the required meters are in place, weekly operating hours, number of workers on main shift, and whether thermostats are set back on nights and weekends. Information on the building envelope is also needed on this page, and please provide the orientations for which the tenant floor or suite has exterior exposure and the percentage of exterior walls that are made of glass. So, tenant tool metering criteria. An accurate measurement of energy use is critical to good energy management. Having meters in place to measure and track energy use in the tenant space will allow the applicant to establish an energy baseline and measure progress in reducing energy over time, and ultimately to determine how efficient the space is in operation. The requirement for plus or minus 2% accuracy is intended to ensure that the meters are accurately measuring energy use without specifying relatively costly utility grade meters. This performance specification should allow applicants to use newer and evolving meter technology that is flexible and cost effective. A best practice here is to make sure that the data reported by the meters is relayed to a dashboard or other system that provides the tenant with actionable information rather than with raw data. All right, so this slide is going to go over the metering criteria for data centers. So if a data center is present in the space, it must be metered separately. Acceptable data center metering includes any metering configuration that allows separate tracking of IT energy use and/or total data center energy use. Note that a data center is intended for sophisticated computing and server functions, which typically include high-density computing equipment, such as server racks used for data storage and processing, dedicated power and cooling systems, a constant power load of 75 kilowatts or more, uninterruptible power supplies or UPS, and raised floors. All right, so the next piece of information needed is equipment, including computers, printers, and appliances. This information is used primarily for the energy estimate calculation. Please indicate any pieces of equipment that are ENERGY STAR certified. And here are a few ways to find out if your product is ENERGY STAR certified. So one, check if there is an ENERGY STAR label or other mark that is somewhere on the product. And if not, then check the energy efficient products page and search by the make and model. So this does require you to be able to find a label either of your product, so the serial number of the product, and so sometimes it can be a little tricky if labels have rubbed off over the years, but that is going to be your best bet, is figuring out what product you do have or finding an ENERGY STAR label. So if you cannot do that and you can't determine whether a piece of equipment is ENERGY STAR certified, then you can indicate that the number is unknown by checking the box in the last column of the equipment table as shown on the next page. So after entering floor or suite level equipment accounts, tenants must affirm that sleep settings for computer equipment have been enabled or will be enabled once computers are installed. So lighting information is then the next section that is needed to set up your tenant space. This information is required to generate an estimated lighting energy use intensity, which is used in the evaluation of the lighting requirement. So the tool calculates the tenant's target LEUI and then estimates whether the actual LEUI of the space is at or below the target. The target LEUI is based on the size of the space and the hours of operation, and it reflects a lighting power density that is 25% below the ASHRAE 90.1 2013 level. All right, and I'm just going to put that in the chat so that if you want to look it up and gain some more familiarity, you can do that. So the actual LEUI is based on hours of operation as well as the type and quantity of light fixtures and controls in the space. Then document all lighting fixtures in the tenant space by floor. The following are needed to accurately track lighting information. First is fixture name, and this can be anything that the user wants to enter. The next is light source, so LED bulb, LED fixture, fluorescent tube, CFL, incandescent, halogen, etc. Number of each type of bulb, and then bulb wattage if applicable, fixture wattage also if applicable, total number of fixtures and motion sensor, vacancy, occupancy, or none, daylight sensor, yes or no, and then tuning, yes or no. So as you can also tell, I do recommend that you take a good amount of time. You plan to take a good amount of time working on the lighting fixtures part because that is going to be very detail oriented and also take a good amount of your application process time. So after all of your lighting information has been entered, then you will have completed the information requirements for that floor or suite. Then when you click continue, you will be brought back to the tenant space homepage. And if your tenant space consists of multiple floors or suites, then you'll repeat the previous steps to add more suites or floors until your entire tenant space is accounted for. To double check the suite or floor details that you just entered, click on the floor or suite name in the blue box or use the drop-down menu to directly access and edit specific sections. Clicking on the name of the tenant space or selecting View Floor/Suite Data in the drop-down menu will take you to a summary page that describes the information you just entered in the prior 3 sections. So that's tenant floor or suite information is the first one, the second is equipment information, and the third is lighting information. From there, you will be able to review and, if necessary, edit all information entered. This page can also be used to assess performance on a suite by suite or floor by floor level. To keep track of how your overall tenant space metrics are calculated, view the overall metrics summary box in the lower left-hand side of the home page. For the tenant tool, here are some tips and tricks for dealing with multiple suites or floors. So if your tenant space has multiple floors or suites, we recommend that you name each floor or suite prior to inputting your property into Portfolio Manager, and this will ensure that you account for all spaces. Portfolio Manager evaluates lighting requirements in order to determine if a tenant space is eligible for recognition. A weighted average of all of your tenant floors or suites serves as the basis for this lighting evaluation. Your estimated LEUI does need to be below your target LEUI for the entire tenant space only. Note that just because one of your floors or suites does not meet the LEUI target, that does not mean that you are ineligible for recognition so long as the other floors or suites compensate. To continue on with some of our tips and tricks for tenant spaces with multiple suites or floors. So after entering your first floor or suite, you'll notice that below the floor or suite table on the tenant homepage, there are two gross floor areas displayed. The first GFA is for the sum of tenant floor / suite GFA. The second GFA is the tenant space GFA from Portfolio Manager. So please note that the value that you entered when you first set up your property is listed here. So make sure that it is correct when you enter it the first time. So basically, also make sure that these two values match up. Otherwise, you will be getting an error message. Then when you are adding your additional floors or suites, if they are similar or identical, then you can use the copy button to copy the information to a new floor or a new suite. If your tenant space is ineligible to apply for recognition, then you will instead see a link that says, "Not eligible to apply for tenant space recognition." There are a number of reasons why your tenant space may not be eligible, including a mismatch between the property GFA and the sum of floor suite GFAs, or LEUI exceeding the target value, and lack of required meters or lack of sleep settings for computer equipment. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and we're just going to go over a few different things that we've talked about. Not everything, but we are just going to go through a few different points here. All right. So I'm going to share my screen shortly. All right, bear with me as I get things sorted out. All right. Mimi, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, it looks good.
Great, thank you. All right, so the first thing we're going to go over is a tenant example here. So this is an example one. We're going to go over the application a little bit more, but as you can see here, once you've designated it as a tenant space, you're going to have a tenant module down here that you can click into. And also this is what it looks like if it's not currently eligible for ENERGY STAR certification. In my case, it's because I added no energy. This is just an example and I did not add in any meters, so it's not going to be eligible. So that's basically what it's going to look like. And then Okay. So if you have a new tenant space application, if you are totally new to Portfolio Manager, like maybe someone just asked you and said, hey, can you do a tenant space Portfolio Manager account and you've never done that before, never used Portfolio Manager, then what I'm doing is even a step beyond what you're going to need how to do, because you're first going to have to sign up for an ENERGY STAR Portfolio Manager account. But that is pretty straightforward. You're just going to Google portfoliomanager.energystar.gov up here, and then you're going to make an account. And then once you make an account, you are going to come to a page that's going to look pretty similar to mine, except you're not going to have any properties. And then from there, you're going to start adding in properties. So for today, we're going to add a property here. And so we're just gonna do a simple office building. And then for a tenant space, you want to choose none. So one is if your property is a single building, and more than one is if your property has multiple buildings. So both of those are only going to be if you have a whole building or more than that, and then that's going to let you apply for regular ENERGY STAR certification. But in this case, because we tenant spaces, we want to be choosing none to make sure that we are not designating ourselves falsely. And today I am going to choose test property. And if you were actually doing this, you would choose existing, but for me, just to avoid any confusing issues, I'm going to be doing test property. All right, so then we're going to get started. So from here, you can do we're just going to fill out the name here. I recommend making this specific. If you have multiple tenant spaces, make sure that you name it as a part of the organization. So we'll actually do this. And then also, like I said, the certification for tenant spaces is only eligible or is only available in the United States. So if you are in any other country, you won't be able to get certified, but you can still set up your property. And we're just going to do good old EPA building. All right. And then setting up the year that it was built. All right. And so yeah, just as a reminder too, the GFA that you're filling in here is the GFA for the tenant space itself. We're going to be getting to filling out the GFA for the whole building later. I'm just going to say it's 90 and continue. All right, so then you're going to, if you have done any other certifications, you're going to recognize this part of it. So you're just going to fill this out as normal. Once again, this part is for the tenant space. It'll be clear for you when it is referencing the whole building. All right, and typically it's 50% or more. All right, so now we have a beautiful tenant space that is here. And then once we've created a tenant space, then you're going to see the tenant space module. So that is something that sometimes confuses folks. They think that they're going to be seeing the tenant space module a lot earlier, but instead you have to first create a property, designate and make it clear that it is a tenant space, go through the steps that we just went through, and then and only then will the tenant module pop up for you. So we're not going to go through all of these steps, but this is something that you'll have to fill out on your own. So basically, this is just going to take you through step-by-step questionnaire about different details. So again, I'm just going to remind you that this process is going to take some time. It's going to be a lot of detail gathering. So have reasonable expectations for the timeline of this. It may be a lot longer than you expect, especially if you end up having to communicate with your landlord or something like that. The trick with tenant space is or can be that getting all the information that you need can sometimes be a little bit tricky. That happens with certification, whole building certifications as well, of course, but tenant space, just because you don't own all of the information, this can be a little bit difficult sometimes. So again, just make sure that things are realistic in your timeline. So we'll just go through this. I'm just going to say that this is the EPA building. We're going to guess that it's 100,000 square feet. That is quite large, but there we go. And then probably around that. And then you're also going to be asked what sort of fuel. So you only have two choices here. You can do electric or you can do fossil fuel, steam, or other. So instead, I'm just going to do electric and then click save. So then after that, this is where adding a tenant floor or suite comes in. So for this, you're just going to name the suite and the floor, and then after that, you're going to go through the usable floors, the usable floor area, weekly operating hours of this specific floor or suite. And again, you're going to maybe have to do multiple of these. If you have a tenant space that has multiple floors or suites, you are going to have to do multiple of these spaces. And then you'll also want to be able to check off which way your windows face. So for now, that's what we're going to go through with sharing our screen. But the takeaway basically is, one, it does take time. There's a lot of details that you're going to need. And then also two, you do have to designate that your property is a tenant space, and then and only then will you get the tenant module that pops up. All right. Let me just get back to where we were. Okay, let's see. So for our next section, we are going to cover how to apply for recognition. Now that your tenant space is set up, then the next step is to apply for recognition. Now, as we saw in the one that I did for screen sharing, I was not eligible, but once you are eligible and you put in all the information that you need to, this button is going to pop up and it's going to say eligible to apply for tenant space recognition. So you're going to click on that button and then that's going to open the application portal. And also, again, if you're not eligible, this button will not show up. This page that you're going to land on is where you can review your basic tenant space and floor/suite information, and then make edits as needed. You can also provide a customized property name for the ENERGY STAR building registry and a photo of your space. In the next step, you will be asked to select the primary contact for the application, and this is the person who will receive emails with any questions about the application. Then the signatory, and that should be a direct employee of the tenant organization, not a consultant or an SPP. And then finally, the licensed professional who will perform or supervise the site visit and verify the application contents. You can choose contacts from the drop-down menus provided, or you can also add a new one. If you do choose from existing contacts in Portfolio Manager, please do ensure that all contact information, including email addresses, are up to date for that contact. More details on LP responsibilities can be found in the ENERGY STAR Tenant Space Guide for licensed professionals. So again, when we send this out, everything will be hyperlinked here, but I am actually just gonna do a real quick check and get you that link right now. All right. All right, so that is the LP guide for tenant space recognition. Next, you will select where you would like the ENERGY STAR Tenant Space decal, certificate, and congratulatory letter mailed to. And again, please do be sure that the address is correct for any pre-populated contacts in Portfolio Manager. It'll definitely happen a lot where somebody's used the same contact over the years in their portfolio manager account, but then that person's contact information changes, and then you've not updated that or portfolio manager, or they've not updated in their location, and it'll eventually get to you, but it does take a lot longer. So definitely do double check that everything is accurate in the address. That'll definitely save you a lot of time. And then also enter the name of the person to whom the letter should be addressed, because the letter will say Dear XYZ, so we want to get that name correct. In this next step, then you will generate your PDF application for review and signatures. The PDF that you generate at this step should be provided to the licensed professional for review during the site visit so that the LP can verify all the information. Assuming that there are no issues found during the site visit that require correction, the LP can then sign and stamp the application and pass it along to the signatory for their signature as well. If issues are found that require correction, a new PDF can be generated once corrections have been made. In this step, you will be asked to provide details on when the site visit was performed, who performed it, and who verified it, and that should be the licensed professional. You will also be asked if the LP found any issues during the site visit. So site visits must be performed around the 6-month period prior to the application submission. So again, this process does take a pretty long time, so just make sure that you're thinking ahead with it and setting realistic deadlines for yourself. If you selected yes to the final question in the site visit step indicating that issues were found, then you will be directed to the revise and regenerate step. In this step, you will indicate the areas where corrections need to be made. If revisions were made since you last generated your PDF application, then you will be able to generate a new PDF with updated information for the LP and signatory to complete and sign. In the final step of the application process, you will enter your application tracking number, and you can find this in the lower right-hand corner of your final signed and stamped PDF application. If you generated multiple PDFs during the course of the application process, please be sure that the number that you entered matches the final, correct, and signed version. If it does not match, and just as a little trick, usually it's the middle number that talks about the version number. So that's going to be in the first, as you can see on the screen, there's 4 zeros, and then after it, there's 5 zeros. So make sure that those will definitely need to match. And then also after that, you'll have to attach a copy of the completed PDF application at this stage. You will also be prompted to upload your efficient equipment procurement policy here. And the policy may be specific to the tenant space, or it can also be adopted at a higher level of the organization leasing the space. So it could be a corporate statement such as Target saying that they promise that all of their spaces will purchase ENERGY STAR equipment, or it could be a more specific procurement policy that is specific to the tenant space that you're applying to that says Target on Wisconsin Avenue will always purchase ENERGY STAR equipment and the like. So the policy must contain language that confirms that the tenant will procure ENERGY STAR certified equipment whenever possible. And make sure you do have that language in your procurement statement. Otherwise, myself or someone else will be reaching out to you to make sure that that gets changed. Once your application and procurement policy have been uploaded, you will click Submit. E-sign your application with your portfolio manager credentials and click on Submit to EPA to finalize your submission. And we have reached our final section, which is seeing your application through to getting an award. Once your application has been submitted, please be sure to have your primary application contact pay close attention to their email and watch out for questions from our review team. If you have any questions about your application or the process in general, you will be going to the building's help desk that I sent a little bit earlier, but that I will send again. All right, so send an email to these folks and then they will be able to help you out. Finally, you can view tenant spaces that have earned recognition. So the link on this slide is hyperlinked. So once you get your slides, you can click on the link or you will go to this link that I'm about to send. All right. Hang on 1 second, just getting the link in. All right, so this is a list of the tenant spaces that have been recognized. So with that, we will close out today's webinar and thank you very much for joining, and also feel free to send in any questions that you have on the chat. And also on your way out, I do ask that you fill out the survey. It'll just ask you a few questions about your satisfaction. You can just rate it numerically. And so please do consider filling it out because we do read through every single comment and rating that we get. Because we want to make sure that our presentations are doing the best that they can to help you all out in our overall mission of getting buildings and properties to emit fewer greenhouse gases. So if you liked or disliked anything, please do leave a comment so that we can keep improving and so that we can keep things that are working continuing. So thank you very much. And I'm going to get a quick sip of water and then I'm going to start the questions. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day. All right, so we got one question that says, regarding tenant spaces that can be eligible, if just one tenant in a large office applies, would this be okay? Or do all tenants in an office need to apply for recognition? So you can just apply. You can just have one tenant out of 100 apply in a building, and that's just fine. The great part about tenant space is we do recognize that it's not possible for every tenant in the building to either want to take the time to apply or just to apply in general. So if you can apply, you don't have to worry about anybody else and you can just go for it yourself, regardless of what other folks are doing in your building. And so there's no cost associated with the recognition. I just got that question. But it usually does take hiring a professional, an LP, to complete the process. And so that can be costly and that can take about $1,000 or a little over $1,000 to hire that out, to hire out for an LP. So we don't charge as part of the ENERGY STAR program. It's free for us, but you have to be able to get all of the steps done in order to apply, and that may or may not cost you something. But yeah, not like college applications, everything is free, which is great. Yeah, sure thing. All right, let me know if anybody has any other questions because currently I see nothing. Oh, that's not true. We just got a new one. Yes, so the list of LPs that can be used for ENERGY STAR certification is the same for tenant space recognition. And then, do I have any rules of thumb for what the cost is going to be of installing sub-metering? So I wish that I had a better answer for you, but that is going to be so property specific. Again, I know that you want something a little bit more specific, but it really is just so property specific, like depending on construction that you have and what your metering, what your building's metering looks like, and how advanced you want to get. So, unsatisfying answer, it's going to be a huge range. All right, any other questions coming in? I don't see any, so I'm going to hang on for another minute and we'll see if anything comes in. So, to the person who asked me about the rules of thumb for cost of installing a sub-meter, so I did just look it up on our website, and it does say around $300 to $600 per meter. Again, that's already a pretty big range, but hopefully that gives you something to shoot for. But no promises there, of course, because that can depend on what, like I said, construction things, who you hire, time of year, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, you're welcome. Glad I could give you a range that you're not thinking it's maybe $1 million per meter. All right, seeing no other questions coming in, I think we'll end it there. But again, please do reach out to our help desk if you have any questions. They are amazing folks and they've got a 95% satisfaction rate as far as their responses go, or I think even higher than that. And they also, like I said, have a 4 business hour response time. So they are East Coast mostly. So if you do reach out to them now, you'll be hearing back sometime tomorrow. But I really do recommend reaching out to them. And also, if you do want any extra help walking through your property, we have the Ask the Expert webinars that happen every other Wednesday. So we're going to have it next Wednesday. And so if you submit your questions ahead of time, you'll have a portfolio manager expert walk through your property with you and be able to answer really any questions. Think of third grade math class. You're just going to be sitting there getting all of your questions from basic to super advanced answered. And they're super helpful and they want to help you out as much as possible. So highly recommend that. Other than that, thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful day and fill out that survey. Thank you.